These are the top 6 questions that I get from investors when they start asking me about renting out their property. Today I'm going to go over the top 6 questions that I get from property owners when they're getting ready to rent out their house, okay? So first things first, they're always asking me, what do I need to do with the house before I get it rented out? Okay, I mean, this is pretty obvious, I think. You need to clean your house, right? Make sure you fix things, right? And you don't turn over a property that needs a lot of work, all right? Reason for that is if you turn over a property in good condition, chances are whatever tenant that wants to rent it will keep it in better condition, all right? You turn over something that's like needs a bunch of work, and they're gonna trash it more. They're like, well, you gave me something that needed a bunch of work. What's a few other things, right? So I would say paint is always a good idea. And like I said, safety repairs, make sure there's smoke detectors, things like that too. But that's what you need to do to get your house ready. If your yard is messed up or you live in a homeowner association and you need your front yard in order, let's get that done too, all right? So that's number 1, okay? Number 2 is, what is the process for putting my house on the market? First thing, we have to make sure that the property is in good shape. Once it's ready, let's figure out the accurate price we need to put it on the market, right? So we're gonna look in the area for similar properties. What did it rent at? Let's compare your house to those homes, and we'll price it appropriately, all right? Like if you want $5,000 rent and everyone else is only getting 3, well, you're probably gonna get close to 3, okay? So just be realistic on that. And you also need to consider, your competition as well too. So like if you put it on the market and you're in a sought after area and there's nothing available, well, hey, chances are we're gonna get a little higher rent, right? But if you put your home on the market and there's like 5 other houses for rent on that same street, well, you better position yourself to be competitive among them, all right? Don't be overpriced and all those things like that. Something else I would like you to consider is the time of year that you put your house on the market too. So I'll tell you, right around the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas time, no one's really trying to move at that time, all right? So if you're trying to put the house on the market at that time, expect it to be slow, okay? But if you're looking at late spring, early summer, it's gonna be a hot time for you, all right? So if you can time it that way, that would be number 3. Where will my property be seen, okay? So, well, it depends on how you advertise it, all right? If you work with a property manager that's part of the Association of Realtors, they'll put it on the MLS, it'll go out onto the websites, the Zillows, the Redfins, all these places like that too. So it depends on who you're working with. And if you're working with a property manager, ask them how they're gonna market and advertise your property, all right? So, and number 4, this is the big question, and this is the most important question in my opinion, is how will I screen for potential tenants, all right? So if you have a house and you're getting ready to rent it out, right? This is the thing that you should be most worried about. You want to find a good tenant. You want to find a tenant that, number 1, will pay the rent every month on time. Number 2, you don't want somebody that's complaining about everything. Number 3, you don't want to house criminals or things like that too. I say that because I want to say this is a screening process that I would recommend. You definitely want to check rental history, all right? Get a couple references, call the last 2 landlords, and verify that they are the landlords, right? Because people will just put like their friend on there and give that as the previous landlord, and they're like, oh yeah, so-and-so, they paid their rent on time every month, they're the great tenant, right? So verify the address, who owns that, and all that stuff. Make sure it's a real previous landlord, all right? Important too is employment verification, right? That's how they make money, so they can pay you rent, right? So you have to make sure that you verify their employment very carefully as well too, because like I said before, someone can just give a number of one of their friends and say, oh, this was my last supervisor or whatever, right? Call them. Well, you want to make sure that they truly are the employment verification person of the company, and if it's a small business, have a little due diligence there. You want to do a credit check, obviously. Credit, just, not saying that you have to have a high credit score to rent a property, but you want to make sure that people are paying their bills, all right? Like if you have somebody that has a bunch of past due bills and is charging off credit cards here and there, skips out on the water bill, the power bills due, that's not going to be a good tenant for you, because if they don't pay their bills, they might not pay the rent, right? Another important thing is when I mentioned criminal stuff, I mean, you want to see if there's any like criminal background here, are they wanted by the law? They owe like a bunch of child support or something like that. These are not good tenants, honestly. You know, like if they don't pay their obligations, good chance that they'll skip out on paying rent with you. Okay, you want to look at they've ever been evicted before. Then you want to see if there's, you know, do they have any social security alerts. But very important is the screening of the tenants. All right, you want to make sure they pay their bills, they have a job, and they have good rental history as well too. Number 5, all right, what happens if the tenant violates the lease agreement, meaning they don't pay the rent or they want to terminate early? They subleasing to friends now or whatever, or they Airbnb-ing out one of the rooms, like what's going on there? Here's the thing, if they don't pay rent or they violate the lease and anything, what recourse do you have as an owner? All right, well, it depends. If they don't pay rent, well, you go into, you know, doing a lease violation. Okay, you didn't pay on time, here's your late fee. Okay, if they don't pay the rent and the late fee, what do you do then? Well, there might be a point where you file to evict this tenant, right? You know, you didn't pay the rent, you still haven't paid me, I need to evict you now. So you have to have a solid lease agreement in place, all right? Signatures, dates, everything spelled out. What happens when you don't pay rent? What happens when you pay late? What happens when you only pay a portion? What happens if you move in people that are not originally on the lease? What happens if you go get 2 dogs or whatever the case is? You need to have a lease agreement. That's what's going to hold up in court. And that's what you need when you try to evict somebody, okay? And finally, number 6, all right? Do I have to pay the utilities on this property? Well, it depends on your lease agreement, right? If the lease agreement says that the tenant is to pay for power, water, and gas and these things based on their usage, well, that makes sense to me, all right? But it all depends on what's in the lease agreement, right? If you want to include utilities and charge a higher rent, you probably can. I don't suggest it, but you also need to leave utilities on while the home is on the market. So before it goes into the tenant's name, you leave it on and you have to supply all these things prior to renting it out. I would say that's a good idea. You don't want to show a property and there's no lights, no water and all that stuff. Keep them on, okay? But once it's rented out, the tenant should be responsible for these things, okay? And in the state of Nevada or in Las Vegas more specifically, you can't transfer like trash and sewer into a tenant's name. So a lot of times here in Vegas, we'll have the homeowner continue to pay sewer and trash and things like that, and then the tenant just reimburses them each month for those costs too. So those are the top 6 questions, all right? If this seems like a little too much for you to handle, I would suggest maybe using a property manager even. Of course, you know, a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to pay the fees. I don't want to pay the fees. Well, I understand that too. And I'll tell you a story. With my first couple rental properties, I too wanted to save money and did not use a property manager. And I don't know, maybe I'm just too nice or whatever, but it's, you know, it's like Christmas time comes around and, you know, oh, can I pay late or can I pay a portion now? And, you know, most of the time kind of got burned on those situations, right? And, you know, after a while, I just realized, you know what, I'm going to pay a professional to manage it for me. I don't want to have to screen the tenants and then try to enforce the lease agreement and get, you know, calls late at night about clogged toilets and things like that too. So, I mean, something for you to consider. But if you want to talk more about investing in real estate, I would love to hear from you. Check out my other videos and thanks for watching.